Danny Hoffman from the University of Washington's Department of Anthropology has written a book about young men and violence in West Africa. In The War Machines, Hoffman chronicles violence from the point of view of the perpetrators, who in many cases were young boys.
I do research primarily on militia movements in West Africa. I've been working for the last 10 years or so mostly in Sierra Leone and Liberia.
Hoffman has a photojournalism background. He covered wars in the Balkans and in southern and eastern African countries. His book includes more than 50 photos that he took while he studied the militia movements in Sierra Leone and Liberia.
A lot of the book is attempting to make the fighters who participated in this war seem much more human. And what I really wanted to do with the text of the book was to say that, in fact, these are people who live complicated lives, and they may be in desperate situations, but they're no less human. The most interesting place that I spent time in doing the book was the ruins of an old hotel, which was in central Freetown, a place called the Brookfields Hotel.
This is the Brookfields Hotel. In 1998 to 2002, the hotel was occupied by young men who made up the militias that fought in the country's Civil War. The men lived there with their families. They lounged on the hotel's grounds and played checkers under a tree near the front gate. They bought cigarettes, rum, and painkillers from a kiosk in the deserted parking lot and played soccer in the empty swimming pool.
The war in Liberia ends in about 2003, and by that point you had a system where you had young men who were periodically moving into the battlefields of the region. They were working as a violent form of labor, and then they would cycle out of that work into other forms of fairly violent labor, whether it was digging diamonds or tapping rubber in the rubber plantations of Liberia or working on behalf of regional politicians. Elections in this region tend to be fairly violent.
You say in the last chapter that this book serves as a warning. How is that?
The groups that I worked with, I think they represent kind of a future that lots of security thinkers envision for other parts of the world, which is this idea that it's better in some cases to outsource security to local forces, especially to underemployed young men. And the thinking seems to be that we give them a form of employment and we ensure a kind of domestic security because we're outsourcing that work to people who know the terrain, who know the local cultures, etc. I mean, we see similar kinds of mobilizations in Iraq and Afghanistan. And my concern is that if we want to understand what that tends to look like over the long term, then we can look to places like Sierra Leone and Liberia, where what you have is the perpetuation of violent conflict, of your arming groups that may or may not end up doing exactly what it is that you imagine they will do.
The War Machines, Young Men and Violence in Sierra Leone and Liberia was published this fall by Duke University Press. This is Molly McElroy with the University of Washington's Office of News and Information.